With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. It's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country.
Canada just made an unexpected move. No press conference, no big announcements, just a few changes in tariffs, quotas, and import-export figures. But behind that silence lies a clear message. America's closest neighbor is tightening the rules of the game, and Washington can't ignore it. At first glance, it all seems to be about milk, butter, and a few monthly shipments. But underneath, it touches a key part of the trade relationship between the two countries. One side says, 298% tariff. The other replies, we haven't even used up the quota. So who's right? Who loses out? And should everyday shoppers be concerned? Canada imposes very high tariffs, ranging from 241% to 298% on milk, cheese, and butter that go over their import quotas. This is part of a system called supply management, designed to protect domestic farmers. However, under the USMCA agreement, the U.S. is allowed to export a set amount of dairy into Canada without paying those high taxes. So far, that limit hasn't been reached. In fact, only about 27% of the duty-free quota has been used, nowhere near the threshold for higher tariffs. This means most U.S. dairy entering Canada is either not taxed or only lightly taxed. The headline numbers 250% or 300% tariffs are the maximum rates, and they rarely apply. Also, keep in mind, dairy is a small slice of U.S.-Canada trade. Energy, autos, and industry carry far more weight. So even with those scary-sounding tariff rates, the price of U.S. milk hasn't seen big changes. If you're still paying around $4 for a carton of milk, you're likely to keep paying $4 next week too. There's no sudden jump to $6 or $7 on the horizon just because of this. The big tariff number's 245.5% for cheese, 298.5% for butter, and 241% for fluid milk only kick in when imports go over a set quota. According to the USMCA, the U.S. can ship a specific amount of dairy to Canada tariff-free. As of now, only about 27% of that allowance has been used. In other words, most U.S. dairy going to Canada is not facing those high rates. And even when you look at the big picture, all 14 quotas under the agreement only account for about 3.5% of Canada's dairy market. Yet, U.S. dairy exports to Canada in 2024 still topped $1 billion. Proof that there's plenty of room to grow, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Because of this, prices for imported dairy remain steady. If you're paying $4 for milk today, that price is holding since the products are coming in under that tax-free threshold. Dairy is just a small player in the overall trade game between the U.S. and Canada. The real heavyweights are energy, automobiles, and industrial goods. Right now, U.S. dairy exports only make up around 3.5% of the Canadian dairy market. Even though the value crossed the $1 billion mark in 2024, it's still a modest portion of the total trade between the two countries. Zooming out a bit, in 2024, the U.S. imported $263 billion worth of agricultural and food products, while exporting only $191 billion. Around $91 billion of that trade was with Canada and Mexico, showing that the agricultural sector is facing a growing trade deficit. So while there may be some friction over dairy, the price tags for products like fresh milk, butter, or cheese on store shelves are not likely to swing wildly because dairy is still a minor piece of the puzzle. What could nudge food prices higher is the bigger picture of rising agricultural imports. For instance, a $10 bag of rice might go up to $11 fairly quickly, thanks to shifting exchange rates and import costs.
Because this is a president who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk too, and he's delivering on his promises to bolster our steel and aluminum industries in this country.
Imagine walking into your local supermarket. The case of beer that used to cost $15 now sells for $17. The car you plan to trade in this year suddenly comes with a price tag thousands of dollars higher. And somewhere, a factory worker is nervously wondering whether their shift will be cut. All of this traces back to one seemingly dry number, a 50% import tariff on aluminum. The question is, how much will that number reshape our everyday lives? On June 4th, the United States doubled its aluminum import tariff from 25% to 50%. The impact was immediate. The Midwest Premium, a key measure of aluminum prices, jumped from just 37 cents per pound in March to 62.5 cents by mid-June. Per ton. That's an increase from roughly $720 to more than $1,370, nearly doubling in just a few months. To put that into perspective, a typical car uses 250 to 400 kilograms of aluminum. With the new prices, the cost of each vehicle could rise by $1,200 to $1,800. The beverage industry, where each can of beer or soda requires around 15 grams of aluminum, could see costs rise by 5 to 7 cents per can. That means a 24-pack could climb by an extra $1 or $2. For a family of 4, the additional monthly expense from canned food and drinks alone could be $15 to $20, a significant burden when multiplied across the year. There is, however, one bright spot. Recycled aluminum is exempt from the 50% tariff. In the first quarter of this year, the U.S. imported 202,000 tons of aluminum scrap, a more than 30% increase from the same period last year. Recycling 1 million beer cans saves about 15 tons of primary aluminum. If this trend continues, the recycling sector could generate tens of thousands of new jobs, from scrap collection to factory operations. But it also sparks a scrap race with Europe. As more material flows into the U.S., higher demand may push scrap prices up by $50 to $70 per ton, with part of that cost eventually filtering back into household grocery bills. Companies are already sounding the alarm. Brewer Molson Coors expects its pre-tax profit this year to fall by 12 to 15%, equal to a loss of roughly $250 to $300 million. To offset the hit, the company may raise product prices by 5 to 10% or cut costs, including jobs. In the auto industry, if production costs rise by $1,500 per vehicle and a manufacturer sells 1 million cars annually, that's $1.5 billion in additional expenses. Consumers will shoulder part of it through higher prices, while the rest could trigger lower output, and with it, the loss of tens of thousands of jobs. Meanwhile, the Producer Price Index PPI for July surged to its highest level in 3 years. Experts warn that if the trend continues, consumer inflation could rise by another 1 to 1.5 percentage points by the end of the year. For everyday shoppers, that translates into a $200 grocery basket up $2 or $3. For ordinary households, these aren't just numbers on a chart. They're the feeling of a thinner wallet every time you walk out of the supermarket.
Yeah, this was a company that I think took a lot of people off guard when they announced earlier this year as much as a $5 billion hit to their bottom line as a result of tariffs. And it sort of, your initial reaction to that is, wait a second, this is an American company that builds a lot of cars in America.
Imagine walking into a car dealership. That SUV you were eyeing last month? It is now $6,000 more expensive. The salesperson gives you a look and size. It is the import taxes. Not my fault. Then you glance at the car next to it, a Japanese one. Just as nice, but $5,000 cheaper. Sound familiar? You are not alone. Millions of Americans are in the same boat. What used to be a simple choice about buying a car has become a bigger story, one that touches on the economy, jobs, and the very idea of what a made-in-America car means anymore. While Ford and GM are losing billions, folks are falling behind on car payments. And imported cars are slowly taking over right here on American soil. In the second quarter of 2025, Ford posted a loss of $800 million and is now forecasting a full-year loss of up to $3 billion. GM has it even tougher, losing $1.1 billion this quarter alone, with annual losses expected to reach $5 billion. A big reason, the rising cost of imported parts, which now make up nearly half the cost of building a vehicle. Each car made in the U.S. now costs between $5,000 and $10,000 more to produce. That price bump is making models like the Ford Bronco less attractive compared to imports like the Toyota 4Runner. Overall, New car prices have jumped by 15 to 20% compared to last year. That means an increase of $5,000 to $15,000 per vehicle. Just in April 2025 alone, prices went up 2.5%, twice the usual pace. Analysts predict that in 2025, we may see 2.5 to 3 million fewer vehicles sold due to sharp drops in demand. Auto loans are also becoming a concern. The percentage of subprime loans, those overdue by 60 days or more, has hit 6.56%, the highest since 1994. More and more Americans are turning to Japanese, Korean, or European cars brands like Toyota, Hyundai, and Subaru, which are keeping their prices more stable and supply more reliable. Since early 2025, the price of new vehicles in the U.S. has jumped by 15 to 20% compared to the same time last year, adding up to an extra $5,000 to $15,000 per car. A model that used to go for $30,000 can now easily cost $35,000 to $45,000. In April 2025 alone, prices rose 2.5%, a clear sign that price pressure is not going away. This sticker shock is keeping many buyers on the sidelines. Experts say we may see 2.5 to 3 million fewer cars on the market this year, simply because people are putting off their purchases. For many, just a $5,000 increase can push a monthly car payment from $500 up to nearly $600, enough to make some folks switch to used cars or hold off entirely. And when sales drop, it is not just the dealerships that feel it. Service centers and local jobs can be affected too. At the start of 2025, the percentage of subprime car loans that were more than 60 days overdue hit 6.56%, the highest it has been in over 30 years. People are struggling to keep up with payments, especially with stricter lending rules and higher car prices. For many households, taking out a car loan today means stretching beyond what they can comfortably afford. That is making the idea of owning a brand new American-made car feel out of reach. Meanwhile, Japanese, Korean, and European automakers brands like Toyota, Hyundai, and Subaru are growing their market share, thanks to better price control and smoother supply chains. They are quickly becoming the go-to choice for U.S. consumers who feel priced out of the domestic market. Going from a $450 monthly payment to $550 or even $600 is a big jump. It is not just about saving money anymore, it is about finding something that fits into a real family budget. And that often means looking beyond American brands.
This entire house is built out of wood. I mean, we really do have wood on the floor, wood on the walls, wood on the ceiling. So it's definitely a concern. One bunk of this material, going up tenfold can cause a huge disruption from a price perspective.
The softwood lumber industry is taking a hit because of significant new duties from the United States. Alberta's biggest softwood lumber market, but BC may be hit the hardest.
Imagine this. You finally decided to fix up the backyard. Maybe lay down some wooden flooring, put up a little gazebo, or just build a shelf for your daughter's room. You've done the math, $60 per bundle of wood. You'll need 10, all set. But when you get to the store, the sign reads $75. You ask the staff, a shrug. New lumber tax. Wood from Canada's gotten expensive. It seems like a small hiccup. But that small change in price is actually part of a much bigger picture, a quiet shakeup that's starting to hit close to home. Canada is pulling back its lumber supply. Big companies like Weyerhaeuser are seeing profits fall. Import taxes are going up. And suddenly, for many American families, the idea of building or renovating a home feels like it's slipping further away. Weyerhaeuser, one of the biggest lumber companies in the United States, just shared its results for the second quarter of 2025. The company made a profit of $87 million. That's almost half of what it earned during the same time last year, which was $173 million. Its revenue stayed fairly steady, coming in between $1.88 and $1.90 billion, actually a little better than what experts had predicted. Still, that big drop in profit points to trouble in the market. Weyerhaeuser also cautioned that its adjusted earnings for the next quarter could fall by another $60 million. These aren't just numbers on a balance sheet. Lumber is closely tied to the housing industry, and when a company like Weyerhaeuser stumbles, it signals that building costs might rise. That means home renovations, new kitchen cabinets, replacing the old front door. laying wooden floors start to feel like bigger decisions for homeowners. In January 2025, new single-family home construction in the U.S. dropped by 8.4%, hitting its lowest point in nearly 3 years. The main culprits? Rising material costs and stubbornly high mortgage interest rates. According to the National Association of Home Builders, NAHB, new import tariffs could raise building costs by another $7,500 to $10,000, and that's just for materials. Investopedia estimates the total increase per home could reach up to $10,900. For families, an additional $10,000 US or more can mean putting building plans on hold, reducing the size of their future home, or needing to borrow a larger amount of money. Even small improvements, like installing wooden floors or adding a new deck, start to strain the household budget. That same bundle of wood that once cost $60. Now it is closer to $70 or $75. As we move into the second half of 2025, the U.S. housing construction industry is running into headwinds, rising costs, high interest rates, and increasing import taxes. According to Reuters, this spring was the slowest for the industry since 2019. A full 71% of builders now say the market is clearly cooling off. Canada supplies about 85% of all softwood lumber imported into the U.S. If tariffs climb to around 35%, the cost of building a house could go up by 4 to 10%, depending on the region. NAHB and other sources say the average added cost per new home is now between $9,200 and $10,900 US due to these changes.